So if you've not met Tim yet on any of our talks, Tim has just published a book about his big ride around the world. So he is going to be talking to us today about his cycle from Reading in the UK to Reading in Pennsylvania in America. So this is a journey that was 46.5 kilometers through 39 countries over 3 years. And this blows my mind. Your budget was £6 a day. That's incredible. So mind you, I suppose you've got to keep it low if you're going for a whole 3 years. So yeah, impressive budgeting there. It sounds like a really epic adventure. I can't wait to hear more about the highs and lows and about your book as well. So over to you, Tim.
Thank you, Nancy. Good morning, everyone. How's everyone doing? This is a kind of an introduction to myself and an introduction to the trip as well. So I hope you enjoy it. I guess to start with, a little bit about me is, thank you for the introduction, Nancy. I decided to go on this trip in 2015 with a desire just to change how I was living in Reading. So I was working in Reading, I was working as a travel agent at the time, and I'm sure as you can appreciate, working as a travel agent, all you do is look up other people's jobs, holidays, or your job is to look up other people's holidays. And it's a huge inspirational job because you look at all these lovely destinations and you think, I really want to go there. So, you know, that kind of gave me more of a desire, more of a push to go. But the real seed was implanted back in 2012 when I was living in Australia. I was sitting on a bus at the time and I had this idea to change up what I was doing because I was not happy with the way I was traveling. I felt that I was going from place to place to place, from hostel to bar, and not seeing anything, and I needed a new motivation. And I'm going to start this talk today with a quick reading from the book Reading to Reading about motivation before we begin any slides or any kind of stuff. So just bear with me. It starts off when I was actually working in a place called Caboolture in Queensland, and I was picking vegetables as my job, which is quite backbreaking, as I'm sure you can imagine. So picking vegetables is actually very similar to long distance cycling. You start out unfit, and the only way to get fitter is by repetition and sticking to your plan, even if at times you want to quit. After just 2 weeks of cycling or fruit picking, you are as fit as you need to be to pick vegetables or cycle across a country or a continent. I continued work as I needed the money to fund my travels. The days went quickly and soon my 3-month contract was complete and I never wanted to see another courgette again. I'm still going. As I left the farm, alone with all my possessions loaded into my backpack, I headed to the bus station for a mini Australian adventure. But I could not shake the feeling that something was missing. I was going from hostel to bar to bus to hostel. And although this was fun, I was just spending my time getting drunk with other Western travellers and not seeing anything outside of that. I was missing Australia's beautiful landscapes and its rich and diverse culture, all the while spending a fortune and losing all my fitness from my farm work. Was this really travelling or just another way to avoid work? Was this any different from the working world as I hopped around the country on various forms of motorised transport and got drunk in different bars? I was dissatisfied and my soul was calling for a change. I wanted a new direction and did not know where to look until one day, sitting alone on a Greyhound bus, I had an epiphany. Maybe I could see Australia by bike. I could cycle around the country and live in a tent. I could be truly independent, save money and keep my levels of fitness up. It would be difficult. Hell, I didn't know if I could cycle around Australia, but maybe I could give it a start. I wrote in my notebook, which I still have to this day, the rough plans of a cycle ride around Australia, which then grew to a cycle ride from Australia back home. Hell, if I could cycle around Australia, I could cycle home, right? I estimated this journey would perhaps take 9 months, and I wrote this would be my rebirth, a new beginning. I was super excited and had just unwittingly written the blueprint that would give me a whole new philosophy for life. At this time, I did not have any cycling experience and had never cycled further than perhaps 10 miles back in my youth. I did, however, enjoy cycling, had commuted by bike both at university and while I worked in London. I knew that when I rode a bike, I felt happy. I felt a level of freedom which I never felt in a car or a bus. At this time, I did not even know there was a thing called cycle touring, and the idea came entirely from a desire to be free rather than any technical knowledge. I closed my notebook that day with the start of an idea germinating in my mind. Little did I know that this bus journey would change my outlook and direction of my entire future. And it did. From that bus journey, I did endeavour to take a small trip across Australia. I cycled originally planned to cycle from Cairns to Brisbane, where I was living at the time, heading towards the music festival, but that got cut short because of the distances required in the desert and me having absolutely zero experience. I mean, what I did, I bought a bike for $100 with my partner Finola, and then we cable tied a milk tray to the back, a milk crate, sorry, to the back of the rack, and then put our backpacks in the milk crate and just started cycling. And that thing was like swiffing all over the place. It was quite perilous and also quite dangerous. So from that first adventure, that idea of cycling around the world germinated. I love being in Australia, and that first little trip gave me a taster of true freedom. Then when I got back and was working as a travel agency, that idea germinated to not only cycle from Australia back home, that idea generated to cycle around the world. And my idea was, what I'll do is I'll cycle from my hometown in Reading, and I saw another Reading on a map in Pennsylvania. So I thought, well, that'd be a good place to finish because it'll be funny. So I decided to cycle from Reading in England to Reading in Pennsylvania, just as a nice way to bookend the trip more than anything else. It also gave me a fixed point of what I was always trying to get to, which I kind of guess gave me a bit more motivation to continue when I was on the road. Because, you know, rather than just ambiguously cycling around the world, I was trying to get somewhere, even if it was a place I'd never even been before or even heard of, just had the same name as the place I happened to live. But you need an endpoint, which is really good. So I'm going to start and show some slides now. I'm going to talk about the trip itself. And then I'm going to move on to sort of talking about the writing process after that. And then there's time for questions at the end. Okay. So I'm just going to quickly share my screen. And present. Lovely. So Reading to Reading, a bicycle journey around the world. Now, when I left for the trip, I was not a cyclist. As I'm sure many of you people are aware, most people who kind of do these big trips fall in two camps. People who are super prepared, maybe a Mark Beaumont type character, or someone who just like hops on a bike and starts cycling. I was definitely in that camp. I had never cycled, you know, much more than a big trip in Australia before this. But the idea germinated to cycle around the world from Reading in England to Reading in Pennsylvania with little experience and not really a clue what was going on. What I did to start out was I bought a big map from a stationery store in Reading and I affixed that to the wall. And I'd drawn a line, all the places that I could possibly cycle through around the world. And that line is pretty much translated into this map here, which pretty much was the same route that I took, more by chance than anything else. The line was just a motivation. It just gave everything a foundation to build upon when I was saving, or when I was putting things together, making decisions and not going out to save money for the trip. So that line was really, really helpful. And I cycled across 46,500 kilometers and 39 countries on the trip itself. And it was amazing. When I started, I left outside from Reading, England. I was a lot bigger then. I was probably fattening up before I had the trip. So when I started the trip to make sure I had enough calories in me, because what I didn't have was any real money. So we had to start with me and my partner Finola, she's also in the orange there. We left with £9,000 in the bank and we thought that would last us for 2 years. It didn't, and I'll get to that later on, but it was enough that we thought we'd have enough. And we budgeted ourselves for about £5 per person per day. But we just had no idea. We just guessed that would be enough. And it kind of was in the end, which was always good to fear. But so we left outside of the Reading Bicycle Kitchen in Reading with my friends and family seeing us off. The bike I bought for £90 secondhand. So I recycled the frame and then bought all the bits that I needed from eBay. So the panniers were off eBay, the wheels were off eBay, the dynamo hub was off eBay. Everything came from a secondhand supplier because I didn't want to spend money on the equipment. I wanted to spend money on the trip. And that was a really good investment for me because it allowed me to have more money for the trip. And the bike that I bought, a secondhand Dawes Sardust steel frame touring bicycle, was flawless until I got hit by a car, which I'll get to later on. But it was a really amazing decision I made. So it allowed me to have more money for the trip as opposed to more money spent on things that would need replacing later on anyway. The reason I wanted to go was just to see the world. I had a morbid curiosity to see the world. From my travel agent's position in Reading, I was curious and I wanted to feel it and taste it and experience it in a way that I knew only bicycle travel could give me. There was no way that the bus would suffice or the airplane. I had to cycle it. I had to ride every hill and see every corner. And that desire was what initially led us to taking that first pedal stroke away from Reading towards the new life, which was a life on the road. But because we had no money, it was difficult. Now, money was a thing that whilst we had some, we had to really be strict on the budget. And that's very hard at the beginning. It's very hard when you roll into a picture perfect European town in spring and all you want to do is have a lovely meal, but you can't. You have to make these decisions because you have to make that money last all the way through 3 years. And the trip in total cost me £9,000. That was including everything, flights, visas, mechanicals, even a flight home from New York to England, I managed to get for 150 quid. But this was 2018 on a really budget airline. But you can do it if you make the sacrifices. And you lived in a tent, I cycled my bike, my only fuel was food, and you make it last. And you're allowed to have that true experience I crave, that true wild, almost feral experience while you're on the road, because you are soaking everything in. You are living in your tent, in the bush. You are the man in the bush. And while on the bike, as I'm sure everyone else says, you are at that perfect speed where it allows you to see and feel and experience and get invitations and meet people and see the real country that you are cycling through. Now, Europe came fast and quick. Just by the way, this picture on my left, probably your right, I'm not sure if it works, that's in Uzbekistan, and they have a real bureaucracy with money. So that was about $100 worth, and that's about 100,000 Uzbek som, and they all carry it around in tote bags, and they can count it really fast, and it blows your mind because you are there spilling notes everywhere, trying to pick up these 1,000 som notes to pile into 100,000 to pay for a hotel or a visa or something like that. So it's a really interesting experience. That's not me showing off. Right. Europe came quick and fast. We crossed England, France, Belgium, Holland, Germany. And we were having a lovely time. But we were also learning at this point. It was easy, it was comfortable, but we were still growing as people and growing as cycle tourists. We were getting used to wild camping. The first night we camped, wild camp, was in France. And we arrived off the ferry at midnight, and we had these maps we printed off from Google Maps because we didn't have any GPS or anything. So we printed these maps off, and trying to find it, we found out that we actually arrived at the wrong port. So I printed off the wrong maps. And so we're trying to get to a hotel we booked, but it was impossible because we didn't have the right map. So we ended up cycling to a little park at midnight, unable to pitch a tent because we never practiced before. So I couldn't put the fly sheet on. So we slept under this mesh, hoping it wouldn't rain. And then at 6 o'clock in the morning, it started raining. And we just got up in the rain, miserable, and a French farmer came along and started shouting at us. And we were like, what are we doing? This is a disaster. So we quickly rode to the correct hotel, asking some locals how to get there, and then bought lots of wine and cheese and pate and ate that in the hotel and rested. And then we could explore. And as we grew as cycle tourists, we grew in confidence and grew in ability. We downloaded GPS maps on our phones. We got much better at wild camping. We got much better at seeing things and being more resolute. We were fitter too. I still am adamant that after 2 weeks of cycling every day, you're kind of as fit as you need to go. It's not racing. You can stop whenever you want, but by having that sort of able to stop, you get fit quickly. And I was cycling maybe 80 to 100 kilometers by this point every day. And in the hills of, say, Czech Republic is really spiky. And Belgium as well. Belgium's really hilly. So we got fit very, very quickly. But by then all of a sudden we'd crossed Europe and we'd kind of crossed into Czech Republic, we'd crossed into Romania, and things started to change mentally. A mental shift of perspective it turned this trip from cycling across Europe, which was quite comfortable, to cycling across countries I'd never heard about before, like Romania, Azerbaijan, Georgia, a place I'd never been or even dreamed about. I didn't even know what to expect. But what I did find is the hospitality, the random hospitality from everyone you meet was fantastic. People were inviting us into their house, sharing teas and coffee with us. Turkey especially, we'd sleep in mosques and petrol stations. One time we asked a guy at a roundabout for directions, and he ran away. And we were like, oh, where has he gone? And he comes back with a pizza. He'd gone to the restaurant, bought a pizza, come back, and was sitting in his little house sharing a pizza, where he looked at the maps and he showed us how to get to the next town and the next town after that. It was really eye-opening, and it changed my perspective, because when I first crossed into Czech Republic, I remember the walls of the houses had billet holes in and no windows. And I was a little bit nervous, a little bit apprehensive, like I didn't want to get my phone out. But that was just me not being confident of A, myself, and B, it was the unknown. And there's always a fear of the unknown. And as we cycled through Czech Republic, Bulgaria, Romania, those fears went away, because that unknown becomes known and you become more confident in your abilities. There is always, I guess, a little bit of fear of the unknown when you cross a new country, but that's exciting, and that's what makes the trip and makes cycling such a joy and a blessing. It's that little butterfly in the chest that comes in as you cross a new boundary into a new place. But all my preconceptions were smashed apart. And in 3 years, I was only ever robbed 3 times, and that was only not physically robbed. That was when I'd left stuff on the bicycle and an opportunist thief had come along. So those fears of places I had, like Eastern Europe, or even Colombia, Honduras, El Salvador, were misaligned with what it's actually like in my experience. You need a say yes mentality as well when you're being hosted. It's really important that you actually engage with the host and people who are hosting and going out their way to look after you. So when you are traveling, it's really good to say yes. Remember, these people are asking you to host you. When I first crossed into, I think, Romania, somebody said, do you want to stay with me? And from my British perspective, I was like, no, I don't want to put you out. It's fine. I don't want to mess around your day. You've probably got plans. But what they really wanted, they wanted to host me because they wanted to share in my experience with them. And by saying yes and allowing yourself to be put into these people's homes and allowing yourself to go with opportunities that you may be unsure about, but it was always a better experience for both people, that those hosting got to share in the journey, and I got some shelter, some food, an experience that I still remember to this day. If you've ever traveled across Azerbaijan, you'll often meet sellers like in this photo, with walls of melons. Now, every melon seller is about maybe 100 meters in a row, a kilometer of row. So you've got maybe 10 melon sellers, and every melon seller wants you to come and eat a melon. So as you're going down this road, you're like, the first melon seller, you're like, lovely. Hello. Oh, can I have a bit of melon? Yeah, it's on me, no problem. Thank you very much. By the time you got to the 8th melon seller, you've eaten about whole watermelon, you can't move. And it's that level of hospitality and kindness, which is A, hilarious, and B, lovely and warm. Once we'd crossed Turkey, we'd crossed into Georgia and Azerbaijan, both fantastic countries. And then it was time to go across the Caspian Sea. Now, the only way to do that as British passport holders was not to go into Iran, but to get a ferry, a cargo ferry across the Caspian Sea, which in itself was a big dilemma because they don't sell tickets. They only sell tickets to 5 or 6 tourists at a time. But they also don't know when the boat's going to come in. So you don't know when the boat's going to come, so when to buy a ticket. So there's, say, maybe it could be 20 people trying to get on the boat, and you just have to call up every day. Is the boat coming in yet? I don't know. It's not here. Literally, there's a woman looking out to the sea to see if the boat's come in. Once you can get the boat, you then have to cycle to the ticket office, buy your tickets for $100, and then quickly cycle 60 kilometers down to where the boat leaves, because it's just about to leave with everyone on. So it was a real difficult procedure, especially because the language was a real difficulty at the time as well. But we made it. We cycled as fast as we could, but realizing we would never make it, we asked our friends to help us get a taxi, and we got a taxi down to the ferry port. We got there, loaded our bikes. My heart was panicking in my chest, thinking that we're not going to make it, thinking I've lost $100, thinking that I'm going to have to go back up to Baku and trying this whole process again. As we raced up to the boat, we saw the captain standing there proud, even like he was welcoming us onto the boat. I said, have we made it? He says, don't worry, guys. The boat doesn't leave for another 5 hours. Welcome to Central Asia. Central Asia was beautiful. It was a hot desert landscape in the beginning, sandy roads, sandstorms, no shade. We had to be better, because we'd never cycled in this kind of levels of isolation and heat before. It was hard. We had to think about things like water and shelter. Often we would sit in the shade underneath an old digger or an old outbuilding just to shelter ourselves from the heat of the day. So from 11 to 3, we couldn't cycle because it was just too hot and too, it would sap our energy reserves. So it was really important that we were better. And it taught us a lot about resilience and real adventure, because things weren't easy anymore. We had to carry maybe 10-litre waters each on the day. We had to stop, rest. Our bikes were getting covered in sands, all in the bottom brackets and in the brakes. And it was tough, but the people out there really did look after us. And the interesting about Central Asia is you go from hot, arid deserts where each morning we'd camp in the desert and we'd lift our bags to scorpions would run out from underneath. And then you cross into Kyrgyzstan and things take a different approach. It's really cold, okay? Like really cold. The first day, I was so shocked because you're at elevation, and because we decided to save a bit of money before we left, we pushed our start date back. So we didn't leave until the beginning of May. So we didn't get to Kyrgyzstan until October. It was freezing. Like, I've never seen anything like it. It was beautiful, but we had to be better. Like each morning when we'd camp, our whole bike would freeze up, the chain would freeze, the brakes would freeze, our tent poles would freeze. We had to boil water and pour it over all our belongings to melt them to be able to carry on the road. I had to buy an extra sleeping bag in Bishkek. So I had to put on one sleeping bag and then we'd put on another sleeping bag to sort of sleep out there at -15. And it was nuts, but it was a real adventure. And what you also see, the cold does bring people together because people will be looking out for us. We'd go and knock into guest houses and have a cup of tea, or we would knock on someone's door and we would sit by the fire for a while, or they'd invite us in and we'd sit by the fire for a while. And then we'd wake up in the morning at say 6 and there's 5, 6, 7 other people all sat around the fire. It's like a real community hub. And I think everyone is looking out for each other. But because of the cold, the roads are icy, but also because it's a transport link from the Chinese, they ship a lot of their goods trucks across the border of Kyrgyzstan and China. The roads are really, really well maintained. So you've got these amazing views with really good roads. It's like being in Switzerland or somewhere, but just more exciting. And it really is a fun, exciting place, if not absolutely freezing. The first night was the first night it snowed, and I'd never experienced snow before, riding in the snow. It was a new experience. And what you don't realize is actually what your hands get covered in snow, and then your gloves get wet, and then your hands get freezing cold, and then you've got to throw your gloves away or try and warm them up, but they never, because it's too cold, they never get back. So you have to keep buying lots and lots of gloves, which is very wasteful, but it's the only way to keep your hands cold, because obviously as you're cycling, your hands don't move. They are absolutely freezing. And the only way I could get my body temperature to be increased was to either shout, scream, or pedal really, really, really fast just to try and get my blood pressure up to sort of warm up my hands and my feet. It was really tough, but it was the most beautiful place I've ever ridden my bike. So I know lots and lots of bike tourists all adore Kyrgyzstan, and I'm another one. And I recommend, if you can go there, maybe go in September rather than October, but it is stunning. And it is a place that stays in my heart. And when everyone asks me, what's your favorite country? I do think Kyrgyzstan is the most amazing place I've ever ridden, and the most beautiful road from Bishkek to Osh I've ever ridden over the 3 high passes on the way. Now, coming down from Tukbal Pass in Kyrgyzstan, what happened was I was cycling down this road. You can see how icy the road gets. So it's quite perilous, because what happens is the snow melts under the sun, and then the snow refreezes as it gets around the corner into the shade. So you're actually cycling on ice. And I didn't have any spikes or anything. I was actually just trying to control myself. It was like falling downhill, perhaps, is a better expression than cycling. And I was falling downhill quite well until I got to a turn and saw some road workers on the sides. And then I slowly fell down into the road, crashed myself right in front of the road workers, to all of their amusement. They're like, what are you doing? The road is made of ice, Tim. And I was like, oh yeah. So then got back on the bike, and as you get lower, the ice melts and it's water, and you can cycle safely back down. But it's a stunning landscape. So we'd cycled across Kyrgyzstan and we made our way across China. China was an interesting country, mainly because we decided to cycle the whole of China, and it's basically one big desert in the west, and it's actually really boring. So I wouldn't recommend anyone does take the Takraman highway personally, because all you end up doing is cycling along a highway for probably about 3,500 kilometers. So we got through China and we got into Vietnam. And we got into Vietnam. We went to things were meant to be better. Things were meant to be easier. The land of smiles in Thailand, hot weather, cheap food, cheap guest houses, a cyclist paradise, they say. But I wasn't having a good time. Cycling as a couple is hard. Cycling as a couple for 9 months is very hard. And we'd spend each day together. And I think what happened is we started to develop a sense of friction between each other, and things weren't really fun anymore. So whilst we were in a comfortable environment, it was also an easy environment. So when we were in the cold, we kind of came together as a neat team. But once we'd got into Southeast Asia, that team started to dissipate. And it was very difficult to stay motivated when you're cycling with someone who the relationship has also broken down and the friends level had broken down. And we decided we weren't really getting on anymore. Whilst it was beautiful, it was just difficult. And I did enjoy it, but it was a lesson of like perseverance, because you're two people on one trip. If one person doesn't want to carry on the trip, it's a very difficult decision to make, especially when you are in a relationship. So we were cycling, but we weren't having much fun. We were probably drinking a lot, spending a lot of money. In fact, Vietnam was the most expensive country we've ever visited, just because we weren't getting on. We just spent all our time booking hostels and not really having the full adventurous experience. And then my frame breaks. So Southeast Asia was somewhere that was really challenging for me. The frame here, I was cycling in a village in Laos, and the rear chain snake snapped just outside this village, and panic stations kick in, and I thought it was really, really bad. But luckily, every village in Laos has a welder, and I was able to get it welded back from this young boy with no mask on, no glasses on. Weld it back. He asked for $1. I gave him $3, and he looked proud as punch. So thank you, young man. He did get me back on the roads, and it did snap again in Thailand, but I got it welded by a motorcycle garage back to full fitness at that point. But yeah, that Dorsada did me proud. But I wasn't really enjoying Southeast Asia. And it came to a point when Fernanda and I decided to break up, and we broke up in Malaysia. She flew home and I flew to Australia. Australia was beautiful, a new challenge of cycling solo, a challenge of cycling a continent on my own. It was easy because it spoke English, but it also was a place that I realized you could actually cycle and meditate at the same time. I call this cycling Zen. So what happened, I'd be cycling along, and it would be beautiful. My mind would clear. I could cycle for 3 hours and it would feel like 20 minutes had gone by. It was really a weird experience, but a beautiful experience. And only by cycling in Australia did I first develop this. And I think this was the thing, only by cycling alone, because my mind was clear of any real stress or any real worry of the other person, because there was always a bit of anxiety when you're cycling as a two. But cycling Zen was a real beautiful moment in Australia. In Australia, I decided to cycle down the middle to Uluru, because I'd said I'd never been there before. So whilst I'd been around the edge of Australia, my route took me from the north to the south, and it was a fantastic Australian journey. Now, at this point, my money was starting to run out, and I probably had about £500 left from my original pot. So we had £9,000 each, me and Finola, and at this point, I probably had about £4,500 to myself, and I'd spent most of that. So I panicked, and I was like, what am I going to do? So I decided to go to New Zealand and get a job. So I could get a working holiday visa quite easily. So 2018, I was 30. So I could go over there. I got a job back selling holidays, and I thought I could sell holidays to anyone. I've been around the world. But everybody from New Zealand wants to go to Fiji. So I sold a lot of holidays to Fiji, but not many to Kazakhstan or Georgia, unfortunately. But it was good. I could top up my money in New Zealand and then head over to South America. And I wanted to start in Ushuaia, the very bottom of Argentina, to look up and point my bicycle north towards Reading for the last time. It was fantastic in South America. It was new. In a way, cycling solo in Australia was quite easy because they speak English. But cycling solo in South America was harder. In a way that, like at the beginning in Patagonia, I didn't really want to speak to anyone because my Spanish, I had no Spanish when I went there. So I couldn't say a single word other than hola. And I had to learn and learn fast. So whilst there are a lot of estancias or farms that you can stay in, I didn't want to go there because my confidence and my language ability was not there. So I decided to brave on and essentially just pedal against the wind and do what I do best, which was camping in the beautiful region of South America. Even though you are against the wind the whole time in Patagonia, about 50 mile an hour of wind coming at you, while cyclists going from the north to the south fly past at say 40 k's an hour. Hello, and you're like, oh, knackered against this wind, which you cycle all day for 8 hours. You've only gone 40 k's because it's horrendous. But it's a real battle. And I kind of enjoyed that battle because whilst I was working in New Zealand, I was kind of losing my fitness and kind of getting back into the world of work. So to come straight out of New Zealand into Patagonia against the wind was a real masochistic challenge that I actually really enjoyed. It led me to be quite creative in terms of places to camp, and lets you know you're in a real wild wilderness. But South America was beautiful. I'd cycled across Argentina and Chile, across the Carretera Austral, and then headed myself north in central Chile. Central Chile itself was a real challenge because my granddad passed away whilst I was in the Atacama Desert, and I was in the middle of nowhere and dealing with grief and sadness. And I'm not going to talk about too much here because it's in the book, but it was a real struggle for me at this point of my life, because you kind of want to be with your family and friends at this time. And here I was on the world's most loneliest road, going north in Chile, up towards in the Atacama Desert. I really struggled for water. So I'd get water from these shrines. The shrines of dead travelers line the roads of South America, especially the Atacama Desert. And they often leave water for people in the shrines, for the spirits to never go thirsty in the desert. So I thought it would be right if I just popped in and had a little bit of water because this spirit was alive and really thirsty. I know my spirit wouldn't mind. And sometimes in these shrines are so ornate and so large that you can actually visit them and go inside them and shut yourself off from the wind. So occasionally I would sleep inside these shrines, often worried that the family or friends of that person would come and visit them and see a guy sleeping on the inside. But luckily that never happened. But again, because it's so barren and desolate, you just have to be creative in the desert. It's just ways of survival almost, just make yourself comfortable. But as we went north, up South America, things got better in Peru and Bolivia. Lots of lovely people to cycle with, beautiful landscapes, good friends, good food, amazing scenery. Two of the real gems of my whole trip is Peru and Bolivia. You can get a 2-course meal in Bolivia for $2. So you don't want much money, go to Bolivia because you can have a lovely food for no money at all. And it's just a mecca for cycling. You'll see so many people cycling in South America. It's fantastic. You can go from the mountains to the jungle, back to the mountains again. I've probably crossed the Andes like 7 times because I got bored of being in the mountains. So I'd ping down, have some jungle time, have some papaya, have some warmth, and then go back up to the mountains, carry on in the beautiful views, and then think, I know what, I'll go to the beach, go down to the beach, have some beach time, and then go back up to the mountains, continue my way across Peru, Ecuador. And in Ecuador, I actually got attacked by leafcutter ants in my tent. This was a result of my MSR 10 after I camped one night and got attacked by leafcutter ants. And it just goes to show you, it's not the animals in the jungle you need to worry about, but it's always the ants that will get you. Insects are the worst. And that was a $300 tent that they destroyed, and I had to gaffer tape it back together for the remaining 5 months on the road. It lasted, but wasn't ideal at the time. I made it my way through across Central America and towards El Salvador, Honduras. Now, right, so quick warning, sorry about that. The next slide is, I'm going to talk quickly about the time I was hit by a car in El Salvador. Now, what happened was I was cycling in El Salvador and was hit from behind by a hit and run driver. If you are squeamish, please look away now. As you can see, my head was bashed up real bad, but I recovered. All this is talked about in the book, but it was the beauty and the humanity of the people of El Salvador who looked after me. I'm very lucky in the fact that I probably have either a thick brain or a thick skull or a small brain that I managed to survive with no injuries. But I can only imagine for my parents who got the call from the El Salvadorian embassy that their son is in hospital after being hit by a car. And cars are the most dangerous thing. Cars and ants are the most dangerous thing of the whole trip. Luckily, after 3 weeks, I was able to cycle again, and only with recurring mental flashbacks and post-traumatic stress. But I took my steps slowly and confidently, 20Ks, 30Ks, 50Ks, to get my confidence back. Interestingly, even now, I can't go down hills very fast because I get flashbacks to the crash. So it's a really interesting insight into the mental after effects of being hit by the car, because the scarring and all that's gone. And after 3 weeks, I was able to cycle again. But it was these guys that looked after me. They collected up all my stuff from the side of the road. This is the police in Jacaro in El Salvador, and they found all my belongings, even my souvenirs. Nothing was lost other than my glasses and my mobile phone, and even my little trinkets were saved. So they really did look after me and made me a warm welcome. And in places like El Salvador and Honduras, which are potentially dangerous, I only found warmth, love, and hospitality from everyone I went. The bike was pretty bashed up though. Unfortunately, the bike, that Dorsada, died in El Salvador. It was smashed in two. So what happened was I managed to find a bike shop that had some spares, and we took all the parts that were working. I bought a new frame and put all the parts back onto the bicycle that were working and built a new bike from scratch pretty much. The good thing is, because we were working with a second-hand frame again, the new bike only cost me $100 in the end, which was amazing. And I managed to get it back on the road. Now, this point, I had about 6,000 kilometers to go and probably about £1,000 or £800 left in the bank. So I knew that I had to go home, and I knew I had to stretch my money last, make my money last. That was the new bike. It didn't really fit, but it was $100. So it got me there and got me across 6,000 kilometers, which was the key. I cycled across Mexico with some friends in Guatemala, and then I found myself up in America. America was a new start, English speaking again, but it was an amazing journey. It was the end of the journey, and I cycled across the south along the southern tier and then up north. And I was camping a lot and warm showersing a lot, but the journey was coming to an end, and I felt ready to end it. I felt ready to finish and ready to go home. But yeah, I guess the next slide is a video of the last night that I'm just going to show you now. It's the last night on the road. Tomorrow I'm going to reach Reading, Pennsylvania after 1,081 days, 46,500 kilometers. This is how I'm spending my last night on the road. I could have had a host in the town of Lancaster, but it's not the way it's been done. So I've decided to camp out. I'm cycling another 20 miles, so I'm a bit closer to Reading, and I've camped out, and in the full style of travel. Here's my tent, here's my bike. I'm in the woods. They haven't asked for permission. I'm just camped up here. Today it snowed, so it's been fucking freezing. This is meant to be like summer, and it's not. It's cold as anything. Yes, this is kind of like the end, and I got a bit emotional today. I don't know how I'm going to be able to stop, but tomorrow's going to be a hell of a party, that's for sure. I'm going to get to Reading, Pennsylvania, which apparently isn't anything like Reading in England, but, you know, it's an American version. Apparently it's a bit run down, it's an old mining town, but like, I'll go there and have a look and have a couple of beers and a bit of lunch. Someone's offered to buy me the lunch already. I've got somewhere to stay for the evening, so it's going to be really fun. This is the final night. So I'm going to camp out here. I'm going to make dinner. I've got pasta and vegetables and bananas for pudding. So that's a real camping meal. I've got my breakfast of oatmeal and coffee, which is my normal breakfast. So I'm kind of doing it in the same way that I've always done it. So salute to the road. It's been a hell of a journey, and I'll make lots of videos tomorrow as I come to the finish line. Reading! It's the last night. And then I made it. And then with an emotional single pedal stroke, I cycled from someone who was cycling around the world to someone who had cycled around the world. And as I preached the final checkpoint of the Reading Pagoda, a Japanese monument up on a hill in Reading, Pennsylvania, no idea why it's there, I saw my mum and dad there to welcome me at the finish line with the newspapers, the Reading Eagle, there taking photos and interviews. And it was a real beautiful moment and a lovely way to end the trip. And then I'd done it 3 years, 46,500 miles from Reading, England to Reading, Pennsylvania. But the journey didn't end there because everybody wanted a book. So I decided to write Reading to Reading, a bicycle around the world. Now the writing process was actually harder than the writing process, because to write the book was actually quite cathartic. It was quite beautiful to reflect on the journey, the emotional development of myself, the confidence that I grew on, the remembering the stories and the people in which I had met. But the editing process was so hard. To take what is a manuscript of maybe 100,000 words and whittle it down into something that's actually decent and readable was very, very difficult. And it was only with the support of people that had made this book a reality. I won a competition, in fact, to get an editor, an American editor. And I was moving forward really quickly at that stage with the writing process. And I felt really lucky. But then I sent it to America. And this was a very good editor, but it still took 4 or 5 months. And it just, so that's why the book has been so long to come out after the trip, because it just takes ages to write. Writing is actually quite good, but the editing just takes a long time. So luckily my current girlfriend Jo is also works in typography and design. She's helped massively with the book. She's managed a really good editor. Her and her mum Anne have been really helpful. Had a really good core proofreading team as well, which is really helpful because it is a collaboration, it's a project, and you can't do this on your own. But I have self-published it, and it is available now to buy from my website, timmillikin.com, or on Amazon. The version on my website is better because it has colour photos in it. So I'd recommend that one. I actually use the same printer as Tim Moss, Biddle's Books, who have been very good in coming up with the packages I wanted. But yeah, I recommend the writing process to anyone. Even if you don't write it to release it, just write it for yourself. It was very cathartic and a really, really fun experience. So I hope that gives you a bit of an insight into the book, me, the trip. If you do have any questions or comments, I guess now is the time to ask them. I don't know if, Nancy, we have anything from the room or anything like that? Well, Nancy, you're on mute, I think.
Thanks, classic Zoom problem there. Thank you so much, Tim. It was so amazing to hear about that journey with its many highs and lows, and really great honesty about all of those aspects of your trip, which obviously over the course of 3 years is going to be a bit of everything. So yeah, I want to know what's next. What's the plan? Well,
next is so I want to finish this journey. I wrote the book and then have been working as a bushcraft guide and cycle guide. So I've been teaching kids in the woodland in Oxfordshire survival and bushcraft on 3 to 5 day camps, which is amazing. It teaches those kids who come from inner city London how to embrace and be kids again in the outdoors, which is a job I really love and I'm passionate about. I'm also lucky enough to guide cycle trips. I was lucky enough to guide cycle trips. I was working out in Africa at the beginning of the year, but once the pandemic hit, all my work has stopped. It's been a really hard year. In fact, that whole industry is taken a big knock. So at the moment, I'm looking forward to hopefully this autumn to recontinue that. But in terms of my own personal ventures, I'd still love to cycle the Gibb River Road in Australia, Venezuela, Iran. So we'll see what happens down the road with that as well.
So you're going to go back and fill in all the gaps from some of the other countries that you didn't quite make it to.
Yes, that's the plan. Maybe go to Antarctica. Probably not. It's too expensive.
Yeah, someone's just done a big cycling trip there, haven't they?
No, yeah, it's crazy.
It's too cool for me. You need a pretty fat bag for that.
Yes.
Okay, so we've got some questions coming in. How do you cope with loneliness on the road?
Interesting. So loneliness is really hard. Like in Chile, I speak about this in the book quite a lot. How that when I was lonely, I got really sad and quite depressed. And the only way I could deal with that at the time was by drinking. And that was making me even more depressed. So don't drink to overcome loneliness. That's not a good idea. But what I found is just try and get involved in community groups if you can, support on the road from, I remember when I was quite down in Ecuador, I stopped with a charity that rehomed monkeys for 4 days. And that was a lovely place to stop because that filled me with joy and I got to see some baby monkeys running around. Podcasts help with loneliness, just to give you, it's almost like having a friend in your ear. Rather than music, I find podcasts really do give me sort of, almost like someone to talk to.
Yeah.
Reading is really important as well. Just keep reading, get those Kindles out and just read all the books. Light-hearted books are good. You don't need to go too serious sometimes. Just read a crime thriller.
Yeah, cool. Yeah, podcasts are really good, aren't they? It is much more human interaction than just the music. Yeah, totally agree.
I'd never heard of them until I got to Kyrgyzstan and someone's like, do you listen to podcasts? I was like, what's a podcast? And now they're so prevalent in my everyday life. I probably listen to them every day, but they're amazing.
Yeah, brilliant. Okay, and have you got any top tips for trying to keep costs down when you're on a big ride?
Yeah, I guess like accommodation is your biggest cost. Like, if you can camp a lot or use hosts, warm showers, whatever, that will keep your cost down dramatically. Food, I guess, is your other big cost. So it depends what you eat. If you like eating steak dinners, you're going to spend a lot of money. I had a real thing for banana sandwiches, right? So I probably have banana sandwich for lunch every day. And but some people think it's weird, but I think it's really tasty, nutritious, it's full of carbs, and it costs about 10 cents. So it's just making those decisions, I guess, of the trip you want to do, and B, the lifestyle you want to lead. I was quite comfortable eating the same thing every day, camping, and just being quite frugal in those terms. So I guess if you can keep your accommodation costs and your food costs down, then that is the best way to save money on the roads. Before you go on the road, I guess just make those sacrifices in your everyday life and just work out how much you need to save, and then perhaps make the sacrifices to make that happen.
Yeah, giving yourself some targets is always good, isn't it, when you're trying to save up beforehand, and then the sacrifice is slightly less bitter then if you've got a little target to save this much a week or whatever. It's quite good.
Yeah.
Okay, someone's asking, so you mentioned your current girlfriend has given you a lot of help with the book. Have you persuaded her to do any cycling? Is she a cyclist? Are you going to get her on the road?
She's actually ridden the Tour de France route a week before the Pro, so she's on this lifestyle of adventure with me, and perhaps we'll do South America one day, but it's from the north to the south together rather than going against the wind, because
with the wind on your back.
Yeah, exactly, flying.
Yeah, definitely. Okay, cool. We've got. Were there any countries where you didn't feel comfortable to camp out a wild camp?
Interesting. So after getting to those countries, no, not once. Before I got to those countries, many times. I remember going into Honduras. So Honduras, when I was in the country before Honduras, which was Nicaragua, there was lots of talk about how dangerous Honduras is. Take the shortest crossing, but cross it in a day on the bus. And I was like, well, I'll take the shortest crossing, but I'll go find out, and I might get a hotel, because it was essentially a 2 or 3 day crossing on that little section of Honduras that joins Nicaragua and El Salvador. And I got to Honduras, and I felt really comfortable. I stopped, went over the border, and had a watermelon. Bought a watermelon off a guy, sat there and ate it, and a family came along and also bought a watermelon. We sort of ate a watermelon together, and it was a real beautiful experience, a real community lunch. And I just felt really kind and warm. And I thought, I'm going to camp here. So I camped out in a quarry in Honduras. And then that morning left, pushed my bike out and went back on the road. And this guy says, hey man, did you camp here? And I went, yeah. And he goes, oh, good man. Welcome to Honduras. And I was like, oh, you know what? It's that fear that stops you from realizing that these places are dangerous. And I guess the only place I wouldn't camp is in the capital city, because it is that population center is a different ball game. But in terms of countries, there's no country I would feel unsafe in. It's just big population centres, I think I would feel unsafe in.
Yeah, yeah, it's so much harder in big urban centres, isn't it? It's harder cycling, it's harder navigating, it's harder camping. Like,
The pain.
it's a real challenge. Yeah. Okay, give us a bit of detail on your tech setup. So, did you have a laptop, smartphone, navigation? Did you do any blogging? What was your tech situation?
So this is funny. So when I left Reading in 2015, all I had was some paper maps of Google and a compass, and I thought I could get to Turkey just going southeast around the compass. It was really difficult. So I had very little in terms of tech. I had a phone, which I wasn't using at that point, but I did have a phone, and that's the only thing I had in terms of tech. A phone and a Kindle was enough that I needed to go around the world. Didn't need a laptop. I could blog from my phone or blog from an internet cafe on the website. But yeah, I didn't have any real tech. I did have a dynamo actually in the front wheel that charged the phone, and that was indispensable, especially in places like Australia or Kazakhstan, where it wasn't taking accommodation. So I always could power the phone, and therefore had the maps on, and that's all you need these days is a telephone. I guess that goes in everyday life as well.
Yeah. The dynamos are really great for that, aren't they? Really good, simple solution to the charging. You can get set up with that. I love how you're like the opposite of the gear geeks that we hear about in some talks, of like spent months researching like every carbon fiber element of their bike. You're just like, just get something secondhand and go for it. It'll be fine.
Get a bike and just go. It's really simple.
Yeah, there's always someone with a welder when you get stuck anyway, isn't there? So
yeah, exactly.
I love that. It's very encouraging for some of our more less experienced cycle tourists. Just crack on, and you figure it out as you go along, don't you, really?
Exactly. Yeah. When I left, I bought I had all the Lycra and had the clip-in shoes. And I'd cycled from Reading to London in the clipless shoes. I fell over 3 times at traffic lights and then gave them to a charity shop and said, I can't deal with this.
No, I agree. They're more hassle than they're worth, especially if you want to walk somewhere and it's like the reverse of high heels. You're sort of tottering around. Yeah, pain. Okay. So Ben Williams has obviously been checking out your blog. He says you talk about living your best life. Could you expand on that a bit more?
Okay, this was the thought process I had when I was working in Qatar. So after the trip, I was working in the Middle East as a paddleboard and bicycle instructor. And, it was a big decision to sort of leave my old career behind. Like, the trip had changed me in a way that I didn't want to work as a travel agent. And before that, I used to work in television on like big productions. I didn't want to go back into that corporate world. And I felt a real calming sense of purpose and belonging when I was working in the outdoor industry. So finding my most authentic life was a lifetime discovery of change, because, so many people, you go into a job, especially my parents' generation anyway, you go into a job and that's your job for life. And I kind of went a different route and tried different things and worked out what was best. And for me, finding the most authentic life is currently the one I have now. The one that makes me content and makes my heart sing and makes me proud of what I do. But in the future, that could also change, and being aware of that could change again. And maybe I will do something different in 10 years, I don't know. But as long as I'm on the right path, which sits best for me, then I guess that's the most authentic life right now, is the key to it.
Yeah, that's I really like that, being conscious that you're evolving and your needs and preferences and sort of philosophy is evolving as well, and that you don't have to stay on the same path. You just roll with it and evolve and learn as you go along. Okay, that's quite a big, deep philosophical question. The next one's very specific and techie. I don't know if you know the answer to this. How many miles does it take to charge your phone off a hub dynamo?
All right, so what I would do, I would charge a power bank. Right, don't hook your phone up to the dynamo, because what can happen is it can spike and it will fry your telephone and you'll lose all your photos. This happened to me in Australia. I had to pay $200 to get it repaired so I could get all my photos back. So put a battery in there, like a big power bank, and then I guess on a day's ride, it would probably be enough to charge the phone twice, I would imagine. Depends on the terrain. If it's flat, you can go faster, therefore it charges quicker. So yeah, probably twice. To 1 day's ride is maybe 100 Ks for 2 charges, I would suggest.
Yeah, Okay, cool. Yeah, so definitely have a charging battery as an interim. Yeah, that's a good tip. Great. Okay, well, we've got to the end of the list of questions, but there's some lovely comments in the chat. I hope you have a chance to explore them. There's a lot of backup for your not current. We're losing the word current, just girlfriend.
Yeah.
Current implies there's a disaster in the horizon, so just girlfriend. Lots of people backing her up and saying that she owns more bikes than you do, and she can probably teach you a thing or two. So just to make that clear and give her some kudos, and also people saying how lovely it is to hear that you're working with young people and how much they can gonna learn from your philosophy and positive attitude, and that's really, really good to hear. And I'm going to finish with this comment from Piers, who says, thanks for showing us that being a normal human being is enough to do really super things, which is such a lovely comment to end on. So yeah, thanks very much, Tim. It's been an inspiring morning.
Thank you, Nancy. And if anyone does want to buy the book, I'll do a quick plug at the end. So this version is the recommended version because that's colour pictures. That's only available on my website, timmillikin.com, or with black and white photos is available, or ebook on Amazon. Thank you very much, everybody.
Definitely check that out. We've got 3 more events before the festival ends, so check out the what's on, some more philosophy on ethos of cycle touring later, and then, as I say, Timmy Mallet headlining the final day of the festival. So hope you have a lovely day, folks, and see you later. Thanks very much.
Bye-bye.